Great, thanks, Jenny.
Yeah, take it away,
So,
Micah.
so first we wanted to talk about why we're talking about this topic. And I think it's important to share Fran's story. Fran Henry is Stop It Now's founder. She was a survivor, and she herself recognized the really critical need to include adults who could be at risk to harm a child or who have abused a child, as they're in such a unique position in prevention. She also saw the need to use a public health model. She recognized that we needed to look at the causes and the conditions which may increase the likelihood of child sexual abuse, as that'll help us prevent it too. Even recently, Fran has continued to demonstrate her commitment to compassionate conversations like that in her op-ed she recently submitted to one of the local papers here in Western Mass, where she again kind of affirms the need that if we truly want to work in a model of prevention, we need to hold people accountable, but also look within the lens of compassion at what causes their behavior. Um, Her article is available through our website. It's called Fran Henry, Shine Light Onto the Causes of Bad Behavior. And we'd be happy to provide the link to any of you if you're interested as well. It's also really important to discuss primary prevention. That's what Stop It Now is all about. And primary prevention means before harm has occurred, before sexual abuse has happened, before there is an abuser and a survivor. Um, I also wanted to share a quick stat with you guys just to show the scope of the topic that we're discussing today. Um, in one study from these people called Wordle, Simons, and Moreno. This was a non-clinical sample of people. They found that almost 10% of males and more than 4% of females admitted to some sexual interest in children. And this actually supports previous findings that even among a general population, there are adults, both men and women, that report some sexual interest in children. And also, people are reaching out to us when they're noticing their own thoughts and feelings about children and before there are any harmful behaviors. We want to create conditions that both support and welcome people who reach out for help before a child's harmed. And we absolutely believe that child sexual abuse is preventable.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Micah. And when we decided to share these letters from this particular helpline audience in this webinar series, yeah, honestly, we began our own reflection of the work we do here. This is such a part of the key audience that the helpline was created for, those who are sexually attracted to children and who are asking for help. We're, of course, often asked, do these people really call? Do they really ask for help? And of course they do. Minor attracted people, adults with pedophilia do reach out, do ask for help, help before a child's harmed, and help for them to live lives that are rewarding, happy, and authentic. But our own reflection has forced us to dive deeper into our conversations and look at what adults sexually attracted to children are really asking for. We recognize that even our own informed and compassionate program and our helpline team itself can sometimes jump to, well, labeling someone as an adult at risk of abusing once they disclose to us that they're sexually attracted to children. We know that this is not one and the same. There are adults who have unwanted sexual attraction to children and who have not abused, who do not plan to abuse, and probably never will abuse, especially if they're not feeling ostracized and isolated and get support. While we will always offer guidance to get involved with counseling resources, and our goal is always to create conditions to remain harm-free, we really want to better hear each individual's personal ask, what they need to move forward to live both a harm-free life and a happy and healthy life. So imagine what it must be to recognize in yourself this horrible feeling that's out of your control. Nothing you want, and with this sense of, well, being a monster. Again, nothing you want. What you want is to just live a normal life, have a family perhaps, not worry that you have these feelings that if anybody knew about them, everything in your life could change. We want to build empathy. We're not trying to rationalize, excuse, or even forgive. We're not trying to be soft on offenders or offender friendly, as we may have been called in the past. We know this is about protecting children, which means helping and caring about adults. Prevention is about caring that everyone is okay, that everyone's getting support, and that nobody's isolated. We want to learn more about what else we can do to eradicate the barriers for adults who are seeking help. And so the more we can create dialogue to learn more about what folks with attractions, unwanted attractions, are experiencing and what they're asking for, the more we'll be able to create those conditions that allow people to reach out for help when they do need to. So this webinar is about continuing that reflection with you all. Our key objective, pretty basic, is really to just learn more about the experience of an adult who's minor attracted. We're not talking about all adults who are at risk to sexually abuse children. We're focusing on these adults who have identified for themselves feelings and thoughts that are uncomfortable, those sexual feelings that they may have for children. So, excuse me. Before we move to our hearing the voices who call into us, we did want to share with you just kind of a quick picture of our model for response to anyone who does reach out to us. This is for anyone, bystanders, adults worried about themselves, parents, neighbors, grandparents, teachers, whoever. And so take a look at these strategies on our screen. They're both our commitment and our template of how we address helpline inquiries. We emphasize action and we move people to the next step. Our goal is that people feel empowered and prepared to seek help. It may not always mean that they contact a professional or authorities, but that they're committed to taking a next step, whether that be finding and talking to an ally, looking up and learning information, seeking online help, or anything else. We focus on the positive aspects of responding, of reaching out for help and information, and that can include reaching out to therapists, lawyers, child protection, the police, confidential reporting, and self-help resources online.
Thanks, Jenny. We also really want to meet someone where they are with a compassionate tone. No matter where a person is coming from, we want to welcome them. And we also want to bring a sense of hope to the table. It's also really important for us to choose mindful words and language that doesn't judge or demonize someone. We often try to use person-first language, so even if we're talking about someone who has abused a child, we typically don't call them an offender. Similarly, we may say that someone may be a risk to a child, but we stay away from specific labels like pedophile and abuser because those may just not be true. And as we transition into our next slide, here you're going to see one of the typical opening paragraphs that we write to someone who has come to us and disclosed an attraction to children. We welcome the person writing in, and we also want to acknowledge how courageous they are for talking about something so personal and private. You'll see that we really want to start to minimize some of the feelings of isolation that is really quite common. And we also want to communicate hope. You know, there are resources they can turn to for help. We also want to outline some steps they can take to prevent sexual harm. Again, really staying action-oriented.
Great, thanks, Micah. So the questions and the concerns that we hear, these are really very common to what people write in and call and chat into us. Those questions of, am I a monster? And will this ever go away? Is this what it's going to be like forever? And is there help for me? And then in a nutshell, the feelings that are really uncomfortable, shame, fear, depression. This is what we're addressing in these letters. So we'd like to just pause for a moment with a poll. We'd like to ask you whether you believe that an adult who is sexually attracted to children can live a harm-free life. All right, we have almost everyone voted. All right, we're going to close that out and just show that to get a sense of what everybody's seeing.
Yeah, it looks like a large majority of you said yes. There were a couple people who said no, and another large portion that says unsure. But yeah, you know, to help us with that question and so many others, I would like to welcome our guest experts now. First, we'd like to welcome Dr. Jill Levinson. Dr. Levinson is a professor of social work at Barry University in Miami, Florida. She is also a licensed clinical social worker with nearly 30 years of experience working with victims, survivors, and people who have abused. She has published over 100 articles about sexual abuse policies, treatments, and prevention. She is currently working on several projects related to removing barriers for minor attracted persons to seek ethical, competent, and effective therapy services. Jill, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Next, we'd like to introduce you to Wayne Bowers. Wayne is someone we've turned to for many years to help guide our responses, and is actually someone who's featured on our Stories of Hope page. His story was just recently updated within the past few weeks. He was also a previous board member here at Stop It Now. Wayne Bowers is the executive director of Cure Sort. Sex Offenders Restored Through Treatment, or SORT, is an issue chapter of Citizens United for the Rehabilitation of Errants, or CURE, and it is an outreach program for incarcerated and accused sex abusers and their families. SORT works to promote restoration of people who have sexually offended by establishing alternatives to incarceration and to foster a sense of community and responsibility between offenders nationwide. Wayne Bowers, having successfully controlled a once chaotic life with the therapy approach at the Johns Hopkins Sexual Disorders Clinic, directed by Dr. Fred Berlin, has chosen to promote the importance of treatment as opposed to punishment and retaliation. He continues to work in advocacy, and when opportunities arose to promote the success of therapy, he saw the significance of telling his story. Wayne, we really appreciate you being here today.
Thanks a lot. It's great to be with you.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Micah. And again, thank you to Wayne and Jill. And we want to just dive right in and ask both of you about why this conversation is important to each of you, and why is it important that we talk about and with folks who are experiencing sexual attractions, feelings, and thoughts about children. So, Jill, I'd love to start with you. Why is this conversation important to you?
Yes, thank you. Like many other professionals, I think we all sort of come to this maybe through a slightly lopsided journey. And I started my career as a child protection social worker, and I've worked over many, many years with victims and survivors of sexual abuse. And I've also worked for many years with people who've been convicted of sexual crimes. And about 5 years or so ago, I started becoming more aware and interested and thinking about the idea, mainly sparked from my own clients, the idea of prevention, of what if people could have asked and reached out for help before they abused, and why didn't they, and why is that so hard, and could things have been prevented, harm been prevented, not only to child victims but also to people who are engaging in behaviors that feel contradictory to themselves and their own goals. They don't want to be harming others. And so I started thinking about and researching the obstacles to help seeking for people who have sexually abused. And we started to hear some answers, things like, every time I read about a case in the paper, you hear these words like monsters or untreatable or not rehabilitatable. People thought to themselves, well, why even ask for help? I can't be helped. Other people said, I just didn't even know where to go or where to turn. I would see a bus go by, and on the side it said, have a gambling problem? Dial 1-800-GAMBLING. But I never saw a bus that went by that said, are you concerned about your sexual attractions? Call this number. And so I started to think about the obstacles and barriers to help seeking. And as I began to speak to individuals, both who had gotten in some trouble for abusing, but also those who hadn't, they talked about having experiences with therapists that were really quite discouraging. Encountering therapists, not all the time, but sometimes reaching out for help and encountering therapists who seemed to be judgmental or who were making assumptions. And so that was another thing that began, that was interesting to me. So I guess, really, to be honest, I'll admit that when I started thinking about the obstacles to help seeking, I really was thinking from the frame of prevention of child abuse. And when I started talking to some people with minor attraction, what I realized was that it really isn't just about that. It's about the well-being of somebody who is concerned or distressed by some attractions they have, but they don't want to be harming anyone. They don't plan to. They never have, and they wouldn't, because they understand and appreciate why child sexual abuse is not good. So then that question becomes, how can I live a genuine, authentic life? How can I get my mental health needs met? How can I talk about this with a professional in a way that somebody can respond to me in a non-judgmental fashion? So it became important to me ultimately to learn and understand more about the mental health needs and well-being needs of people who think they may have some attractions to minors, and to ultimately help therapists, counselors, psychologists, social workers not be freaked out if somebody ends up in your office and says, hey, I want some help for this, but to be able to provide ethical, compassionate, effective care.
Thank you. I hear that the journey from intervention to prevention, and then bringing that now to education and awareness. And I appreciate you sharing that journey with us. So Wayne, we want to ask you the same thing about, why is this conversation important to you, and why do you think it's important that we talk about this and with folks who are experiencing sexual attraction for children?
Well, I can use a bit of my own experience. And I know I used to talk with Fran Henry that had I known of a Stop It Now and a helpline when I was so confused in my own life many years ago, that I know that I would have contacted it. I know I was looking for information. I didn't know what was going on. I knew I had types of attractions, type of interests that were puzzling, and so I definitely I knew that from a long time ago. I think today, and I know after a long journey of coming to grips with exactly what my sexuality is and where my attractions are and how to find a control and how to stay in control. One of the things that always frustrates me today is, as we see the media and we see legislation always talking about bad people and always talking about the horrible things that have occurred, to the extent that it's understandable why the public is really scared of what has occurred if they hear of such things and topics, terms like you mentioned, monster, predator, etc. And it's come to me that we never spend any time as a public talking about how did these people get the way they are, rather than just talking about what it is they're charged with, just the final results. And we constantly see it. It comes in all types of professions, all types of people, all levels of society. And it should be something that we realize is far beyond just limiting it to people that are, quote, bad people. It is literally something that people are confused about and don't have a way to find an answer, find a way to deal with that. So prevention to me has always been very important, knowing that so much of the work we do with Cure Sort is communicating with people who have been convicted, who are in prison. Our thought is, if we can help them gain a control in their life and support and promote them to get into therapy when they're finished with their sentence, and hopefully get therapy in their prison term, that's a prevention. If that one person is never going to abuse again in our, to us, that's prevention. So that thought has always been there, and I feel it's why we need to understand all kinds of people.
Great. Thank you, Wayne, so much. I really, again, appreciate your journey as well. And I indeed think that prevention means changing a bit of our narratives, as you said, what we see in the media, so that we're not just hearing these stories that are very negative, and aren't also sharing the stories of people who are seeking help or how help is available, and not using labels that actually end up putting up barriers, which may be, Micah, a great segue into our first letter.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jenny. So first, we're going to take a look here at Jesse's letter. And Jesse says, I'm deeply concerned about my sexuality. Since puberty, I've dealt with being sexually attracted to prepubescent children. And while this was not worrisome when I was a young teen, now that I'm an adult, it is deeply distressing. I've not been able to maintain same-age relationships, and am unable to bring myself to speak to a mental health professional, as I'm often extremely afraid of being found out. I'm a monster, and in most people's eyes, I'm no different than the monsters who actually hurt children. I do not want to hurt a child, never have, and will not allow myself to. I do not know where to begin, and I feel desperately scared and alone. Any light you can shed on my seemingly bleak future will be greatly appreciated. Wow. Yeah, this is a really intense letter, and I think it really represents what we hear from so many people that contact us. And, what we were touching on just before is that oftentimes, people with these sexual feelings towards children see themselves as monsters. This is the way they're self-identifying, as this is often something that, we've heard through the media. They're using these words in particular. Jenny, would you click us over to our next slide?
Absolutely.
Thanks. So here's some more things that we often hear, just little snippets of letters that we've compiled. They're not the whole letters, and to be clear, all these people have said that they have never harmed a child at all. So I'd like to ask you guys a question, Wayne and Jill. What are you guys hearing? Wayne, what kind of language and images are people using to describe themselves when they're disclosing sexual feelings for children? Is it just most of what we have touched upon already, or is there something else that we haven't touched upon yet?
I think these are the kind of terms I hear. I've noticed that many people, and I know one of the things that happens in prison, there are not a lot of options on programming, and I think a lot of people go to church services or hear about a spiritual meeting, and I think a lot of people, in trying to get their life together, start participating there. And I hear a lot of people referring to what they've done about how sinful it is. And I guess some do use the terms that you've been using, but so many of them call them, just feel that they don't like how they are, they don't like what they have done, and just the referral to it many times is in the connotation of being sinful.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you so much. And Jill, you've already shared much of what you're hearing yourself, but is there anything else you'd like to add on this, or the kind of impact this has on someone when they're trying to seek help?
Yes, one of the things I hear in this story from the readers or the writers is the isolation and the internal pain. And one thing that we've found in our own research is that about 23% of people with minor attraction who we've surveyed have indicated that they've not only felt suicidal, but have actually even tried to make a suicide attempt. And so these are people who are feeling really badly about themselves. And I can't tell you the relief that I see on someone's face when they're sitting in front of me, whether it's somebody who's been convicted or not, somebody who's just seeking someone to talk to. When I say, you're not a monster. Your attractions are your attractions. We don't choose our attractions. We do choose our behavior, but you're not a monster and you're not a bad person. And I just want this to be a safe place for you to be able to explore your sexuality, but also for it to be a safe place for you to identify and sort through and explore your own personal goals and what you want your life to look like. And it's a real relief, first of all, to have that affirmation that somebody isn't a terrible person just because of their attractions. Secondly, to believe that there is hope and help in sorting through this. And I think we all know from our personal experiences, when we're worried about something in our own life, it really helps to be able to talk and process it with people. If we're holding in something that we're ashamed of or embarrassed about, it can be really freeing and helpful to talk with someone who responds in an affirming and non-judgmental way. That doesn't mean that anybody's condoning bad behavior or victimization, but just giving safe spaces for someone to talk about how they're feeling and to explore their future goals.
Yeah, I think those are all, really fantastic points. And, I completely agree with how important it is when someone is thinking about anything, especially when it's something that feels like it's so self-deprecating or that they're holding to themselves. It's really important to have someone else to bounce those ideas off of, and not feel judged. So thank you for that. And Wayne, did you have anything to add to that at all?
Well, I think coming to grips that you have some type of a different sexuality is a journey in itself. And, I think many people, if they're at a point of being very fearful of offending someone, being, involved with a person physically and knowing that that can lead to an arrest and lead to prosecution, just sets up the thought of I'm a bad person, because that would lead me to being considered bad by, our law and be incarcerated. The problem with that is it doesn't say anything to the person about you do have some type of a different kind of personality. And I think, again, many people, I think, whether it comes from their background, the makeup of their family, the makeup of their church family, of thinking if I have these kind of thoughts, what that means that I am. And, coming to grips with a different type of sexuality is a journey for any person. We know that the stories of people who consider themselves gay, and this is a different kind of a segment of that. And to make that journey and to feel comfortable about that, I think one of the most important things they need to hear is they aren't alone, that there are many other people who are just having the same concerns, have the same kind of thoughts. That to me, I know in my journey, that was very important, because I think I was so isolated in my thinking. I didn't talk to anybody. Nobody knew about my thoughts. And that was so refreshing when I got to Hopkins, and that they told me, that you're not alone. You're going to be here with a lot of other people who may think just like you do. So I think that's all such an important part of the journey the person has to go to understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Jenny, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, a question actually came in on chat that I think this may be a nice place to ask it. And that was wondering about, let me get the exact words. It was about wondering about the virtuous pedophile movement, what both of you think. I know here at Stop It Now, we do actually refer quite frequently to VerPed as a resource for anyone who is committed to living a harm-free life. And so just wondering if either of you have any comments on, again, using the chatter's words, there goes my mouth tingling, on the virtuous pedophile movement.
Hi. I would say a few things. One is that I think it is helpful to stay away from labels. And I think what's been most important for the people who I've talked to who are exploring their attractions in this area is to have a forum where they can open up and share. And so the virtuous VERPED, Before You Act, Stop It Now, these various online forums that provide anonymity, not because people are looking for others to confirm that abusing children is okay, no, but rather to be able to talk with others who might have experienced the same isolation and stigma and questions about themselves and negative self-narrative. So I think these forums have been very important for providing a resource that doesn't really exist in other places in our communities. It's hard enough for someone to go into a one-on-one therapy session and speak confidentially with a licensed, psychotherapist. It's much more difficult, if not impossible, to speak with family and friends or other people in the community, and very, very difficult to find others who have had the same experience. So I think these forums can be important for de-isolation and de-stigmatization and changing the self-narrative.
Yeah, we would agree. I mean, we know that isolation, shame, all of that is just what keeps people unsafe, unhappy, unhealthy. And the more that, even if your thoughts and your feelings, your attractions, that, we can't act on things that are going to hurt children. And yet to know that you're not alone can really help you build the kind of community, build the kind of life that allows one to have joy and to have happiness and to have relationships that are safe and healthy. So we absolutely agree. So maybe we should move on, Micah, to our next
Great.
voices.
Yeah, thanks. And I think some of these voices will help expound upon, some of these topics that we were just talking about. These are Mike and Terry's letters, and these will kind of start to hash out a lot of the other common themes and questions that we hear. I need help this is Mike's letter. He says, I need help as I see myself as a pedophile in that I'm attracted to children, but I haven't molested anyone. Why am I like this? I was just looking to see if there is any help to get away from this. I'm really scared that I could be outed by my community and my family. I would much rather try to suppress my sexual actions as I know just how wrong it really is. Terry says, I'm a 26-year-old who has dealt with a pedophilia mindset for more than half of my life. I have no desire to act on this impulse, but I would really like someone to talk to. What is wrong with me? So in these two letters, we're really seeing this kind of core question. Why am I like this? For some people, it feels important to find a reason or find something to explain why. Are they deserved? Are they cursed? Our particular response, because we do get asked this question a lot, I would say a little bit more on the phones, is that we can't answer. We can use this as more of a jumping off point for emphasizing the importance of professional support. And even the answer of why doesn't always determine what's needed. It's not always the search for a logical or scientific reason, but really more of an answer to what did I do to deserve this? Am I just a bad person? Am I a bad seed? So Jill, I'm wondering, what do you tell someone when they ask this question? Is there a set answer?
Well, I don't think there's a set answer, but I do think I'll answer the question in a slightly different way. I think that there are three really important things for therapists to know, or mental health professionals, because what these two people are saying is, I really want to go talk to someone about this, but I'm not sure I should, and I'm not sure what that will be like. And so again, in the interest of trying to create safe spaces for people to be able to do that, three things that therapists should know. So first of all, discussions about confidentiality and mandatory reporting really need to be clarified. And mental health professionals do need to be very in tune with what the mandatory reporting laws are in each state. They differ from state to state. But in general, what we know is that we're not required to report thoughts unless somebody's really making a specific threat about an identifiable person. So if somebody's coming in and just talking about their attractions in general. That's usually not something that would fall under mandatory reporting. And there are times when I've heard about a therapist feeling like they have to kind of err on the side of caution. And again, I'm certainly not saying to anyone, don't report child abuse. What I'm saying is that if we are breaching confidentiality when there is not something that falls under mandatory reporting, A, that is a violation of our own ethical codes and laws, and B, it's sort of a violation also of the public trust in the sense that there is and should be a presumption on the part of the public that when people seek counseling that it is private and confidential and safe, with very, very few narrow exceptions that are outlined in the law. So that's the first thing. Make sure that you know and understand your ethical codes, your reporting laws, and your licensure laws about mandatory reporting. Second thing is that when somebody comes and initiates contact with a professional, we need to make sure that we're not making assumptions about what their goals are. And so this is what we hear from people with minor attraction, that the therapist assumed that they wanted to change their sexual attraction, that they needed help managing deviant sexual interests or urges, or that they needed to identify risk factors for abuse and safety planning. Those may be relevant goals for some people who seek help, but they may not be for others. So it's very important for the therapist to really listen and ask questions like, what are the goals that you want to work on? What are the things that concern you most about your sexual interests? Help me understand how this affects how you feel about yourself. What do you want me to understand about your experience? Or tell me how this affects your life on a daily basis. And then finally, the third thing I would say is that there may be other different relevant treatment goals to explore with somebody who comes in and wants to talk about minor attraction. And this is what we're hearing from people with minor attraction, that an important relevant treatment goal is self-acceptance, that these are people who struggle a lot with stigma and shame and a negative identity. So helping with self-acceptance. Being able to change that self-narrative. Many individuals come into a treatment relationship with many symptoms of depression, anxiety, suicidal thinking. And so the alleviation of some of those mental health symptoms can be a primary and relevant treatment goal. And if that's being ignored because the therapist assumes that we need to move right to risk management, then you're not really starting where the client is. Some other relevant treatment goals that people have, that they've shared with us, are important to them, are questions about relationships and intimacy. How can you be your genuine and authentic self if you have a secret? How can you develop close relationships with others, even though you have this thing going on inside that's hard to talk about? What about those future hopes and dreams that maybe everybody wants, to have relationships, maybe to be married or to have a family, to feel good about yourself? How can I accomplish that even though I have these attractions that I'm concerned about? Dealing with losses, like maybe the loss of the sexual self. If I'm exclusively attracted to children and not to adults at all, and that's not true in all cases, but if it is, then maybe that means I have to give up my sexual self, and I think that would be hard for any of us to do. But most importantly, the idea of self-acceptance and living an authentic life, and being able to surround oneself with safe, supportive others.
Right. Yeah. No, go ahead.
Well, I'm just curious then, Jill, how important is it for someone to get an answer to the "why am I like this" question? I hear the importance of of making sure that it's a good match, that therapists know their professional obligations, and that the goals aren't always so clear-cut about risk management, but again, about a whole life. But how important is it for someone who really feels, but why me? Why is this happening to me?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think that that is a big question, and it doesn't have an easy answer. And of course, we don't really know exactly why. So some people do seem to be, naturally inclined to be attracted to children or to minors, just like a sexual orientation. So for some people, it just may be what it is. For other people, there may be childhood trauma-related factors that contribute to a sense of emotional compatibility with children, self-esteem issues, sort of being conditioned to be aroused or excited by certain kinds of things because of events or experiences that have happened earlier in their own life. So there is a large array of different kinds of psychological, social, environmental, biological factors that may all come together in very unique ways. So I think that is an important question that many people with minor attraction are asking themselves and wanting answers to. And I don't know that there's always a clear answer, but I think through talking it out and processing it, some people can begin to come to a fuller understanding of the development of their own sexuality and what it means.
All right, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah. And I certainly agree with that point of being able to see someone as a whole person, and not only seeing them only as someone who is attracted to children. There are so many other issues that someone may present with, which may be just as important, if not more important, that may be their true presenting need. So Wayne, I was wondering, did you have anything to add to that? Was there anything that you think is particularly important for folks to know who are asking this particular question of why?
I definitely. I think one of the important things is to help the person take a look at themselves and see all the other positive attributes in their life. No doubt this is a focus that they have right now, and it's a concerning one. But if you can direct the person in finding the other attributes in their life of how are they positive in that way. And some people, even though they do have a sexual attraction to children, it may be that they can find that they have other attributes about children, about young people, that they feel very good about and can see that those are positive, whereas there are boundaries that they cannot go in regard to becoming closely sexually involved with the person. I think one of the things that I have used quite a bit in getting questions such as this, I send an article that Dr. Berlin wrote many years ago, and in it he describes how a person who has such personality has other attributes. And he says it says nothing whatsoever about their temperament, about traits of character, such as kindness versus cruelty, caring versus uncaring, sensitivity versus insensitivity, conscientiousness versus lack of conscience. And I think that's where it's important for a young person or a person who has such attractions to realize these are good things about me. And it just so happens this is a part of my makeup, my behavior that I'm going to have to work on, but it's there, and it is something that I must realize that is a part of me. I think that's, I know I've been asked many times, is this something I can get over? And I know in regards to how my makeup, I know it's just a matter of you have to have a strategy, a makeup of how you are going to know your areas of where you've got to stay very positive about yourself, the boundaries that you must have, etc. So, but I think the more the person can see the other good things in their life and not just focus totally on this is something and it must be bad because this is the way it is. And but it takes time. I know mine. Before I became totally aware and accepted the fact that I was a minor attracted person, I went through the entire journey of am I gay or not? And going through that is quite a difficult process. Looking at my makeup, looking at my family background, what may have caused this. And, you know, the final resolve that I have is, well, this is who I am. This is the person I am, and I have responsibilities that I must stay in control to be safe for myself and definitely be safe for other people.
Well, thank
Yeah,
you, Wayne.
yeah, thank you so much for being so candid. And yeah, just speaking to the fact that this might just be one truth in a person. It, you know, it doesn't have to take over their whole lives, but they have to be aware of it. But it doesn't have to, you know, be a negative attribute. It can just be a truth along with many other attributes that a person may have.
And it's also a really good segue into our next letter. Robin is on the screen now, who just wants the feelings to stop. And you mentioned that, Wayne, and we hear these questions, you know, a lot. Is there help for me? Does treatment work? Will this ever go away? And I think both of you, both Jill and Wayne, you've spoken to that yes, you know, treatment can work, and about the feelings going away. But, you know, I'm wondering if we could talk even just a little bit more about that. We're not talking as much about treatment today. We do plan to do a follow-up webinar, which is what kind of treatment and how does somebody find the right match? But, you know, what can we tell folks about, will these feelings ever go away, or will you be able to feel in control? Jill, why don't we start with you? What do you think about that?
Yeah, again, I wish I could say there's a clear and easy answer to it. I think it's complicated. I think that if somebody has certain attractions, it may not be realistic to think that they can be changed. On the other hand, I think that the strength of certain kinds of feelings or attractions can come and go. I think that some people are exclusively minor attracted, while others may have attractions to minors, but also to adults. In those cases, there may be ways to strengthen or to reinforce the attractions and the relationships with adults, the closeness with adults that help make the attractions to minors less prominent. And so I'm not sure that we really have good ways of actually changing sexual interest or orientation, but I think that for some people, there are ways to modify and to work on the strength of it.
Great, thank you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, so again, I was just going to focus on kind of what you said also, although it can be very distressing. It's really about sometimes accepting that the attractions may not be something that a person can change, but they can create other fulfilling areas of their lives that may compensate. But just having the attractions and the feelings and the thoughts can be very, very uncomfortable. There are also some cognitive thought stopping or some cognitive strategies that people can use to help with their thoughts or their feelings as well.
Yeah, and that, you know, I wanted to add that when we're asked this question, it just, like, we can't tell folks what the cause or what the reason is. We can't answer the question if it will go away. But what we do really know is that everybody deserves to have a safe and respectful place to talk about what's going on with them and to support them, and that they can find, again, research, explore, work through different options and thoughts and feelings about how to manage who they are, as we all do with many of our own attributes. That in some ways that's not unlike, as Wayne mentioned, and as I just saw a chat message, that, you know, while I don't want to necessarily liken sexual attraction to children as sexual attraction to same gender, there are a lot of similar approaches to helping folks with just recognizing their own identity and what that means for the kind of life that they want to lead and what their resources, what communities available, what strategies are available if they need that, and self-acceptance, and feeling deserving and of just having, again, a healthy, wholesome, safe life. So
very, very important idea.
yeah, and we know that the goal may not be to make it go away, but I think, again, when you really landed on that, it could be pieces of understanding or self-acceptance. I think, Jill, you had mentioned alleviate, maybe your own mental health symptoms. And so I guess one of the questions that I have as a follow-up to that, can somebody be working on, if necessary, both risk management and their general self-esteem and self-worth and self-concept? Can you do both of those together in treatment?
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's really about self-efficacy as well. So if somebody is concerned about their sexual attractions and they are concerned about acting on it, then absolutely that is something that can and should be addressed. So I hope I'm not misunderstood to say that that should be ignored or that that's not an issue. And so helping somebody to think about the appropriate emotional, physical, generational boundaries that they can navigate in their own life to keep themselves safe, as well as building strong relationships with other age-appropriate peers. Those are important. And the more in control we all feel of our own lives and our own behaviors, the better we feel about ourselves. Maybe there's an analogy in some ways to other types of behavioral, addictions, for lack of a better word, that people learn how to navigate their urges or their desires to engage in behaviors or substances that they know they shouldn't, and they figure out ways to plan their life around resisting that temptation and finding other things that are fulfilling to compensate.
Great, thanks.
Penny,
Thank you.
one that I found just an example of how I was able to find a good control, and I'll just paraphrase it. When I was in an assertive training program at Johns Hopkins, it turned out a young man that was in the program, who was in another part of the hospital but was in our group, was very similar to one of the people I had abused. And I brought that up in therapy the next session that we had, and the therapist said, okay, well, let's walk through that. Now, how would you handle that? You're in an assertive training thing. How would you give him respect? And so that I walked through the thought process of what I would do. Okay, I see I'm attracted, but I owe him the right to his privacy. I owe him the right to his innocence. He's a young person. I owe him the right to learn about the type of thoughts I was having on his own terms. And she said, okay, and how about yourself? Well, I owe it to myself to not go any further here. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I've already had problems. I owe it to myself to learn a self-concept where I don't make a move on that. And so she said, every time you see somebody that you're attracted to, go through those same thought processes. And I did that for a very long time, until eventually it got to where I would see somebody and I would just make the comment, oh, he's cute. And that sort of just summarized everything that I just went through. And the key was not to focus on him anymore. If I was driving somewhere and I saw him, don't look in the rearview mirror, keep moving, just go on. And I have continued that through the many years, to the extent that I feel it's just a part of me. But I think that's a good example of how, for me, it was very personal to do that, give respect to the other person, and yet at the same time thinking about how it also helps me.
Oh, thank you again, Wayne, for sharing that personal piece. And I think that it's so helpful from somebody who's been on your journey for a number of years, that those who may be listening now or later, or just the way that you've guided us and helping folks again, realize that this is a process, like any of the behaviors that any of us try to change. It is not something that just comes from, knowing, this is bad for me or bad for someone else, I have to stop doing it. That we need to learn new ways of relating to ourselves, to our thoughts, to our feelings. And I think that you exemplified that really wonderfully. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Wayne. I would just add one other thing to that, which is that when we use the term minor attraction, we're covering a lot of ground. So there are people who may be attracted to prepubescent children. There may be people who are attracted to young teens or middle teens, and then there are others who describe themselves as being attracted to older teens or quote unquote barely legal. And I think so that's important too, to sort of figure out where along that continuum a person feels, and what, not just the physical attraction, but what other types of emotional issues might be related to that. So somebody might be attracted to a relationship with a younger person because that other person looks up to me and makes me feel better about myself and makes me feel smarter. So I would also say it's important for people with minor attraction to think about what kind of relationship they want to have, where they can be in a relationship with a peer where it's mutual and where somebody is mature enough to have that mutuality and exchange of needs emotionally, psychologically, and otherwise, to really to be a good partner, a good friend, a good source of support in different kinds of ways.
Great. Thank you. Very important.
Great.
Well, probably, Micah, not surprising, we realized that we had more than enough for one webinar. We are running out of time.
Yeah, we are, but you guys have helped us cover so much ground here, and you really have been, both of you, so wonderful. So thank you so much, Jill and Wayne, for your honest answers, for your informed answers, and for helping us continue to bring a really candid and important conversation about people who are minor attracted, and about prevention overall. I'm Jenny, did we want to open the floor up for questions, or?
I think we've actually run out of time,
Okay.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, I flashed on a couple of resources, and anybody can always contact Stop It Now. Visit our website where we do have resources for adults who are looking specifically for support and help for themselves. And otherwise, I think I'd just like to let us close out with this quote from one of our letter writers who wrote in with her gratitude for having folks to reach out to. Exactly what we want is that folks know that they can ask someone, can talk to someone about what's going on. And I echo Micah's gratitude to both you, Jill and Wayne. And we're sorry we're running out of time. We definitely will be following up with another webinar, and we invite anybody who has any burning questions to please reach out to us. And thank you as always for joining us, and look for an announcement for our June webinar on helping adults who are attracted sexually to children find help that matches what their needs are. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for putting this together. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. We'll see you.